It all began on a bright Saturday morning when I stood outside a lawyer's office with divorce papers folded neatly inside a brown envelope, convinced that my marriage had reached the point where there was nothing left to save. The sunlight warmed the pavement, people laughed as they passed by, and somewhere nearby children chased pigeons across the town square, yet inside me everything felt cold and empty. I believed I knew the truth about my wife. I believed we had become strangers living beneath the same roof, sharing the same table, sleeping in the same bed, but carrying completely different lives in our hearts. I had rehearsed the words 100 times, telling myself that sometimes letting go was the kindest thing two people could do. I never imagined that before the day ended, a single conversation I wasn't meant to hear would completely rewrite the future I thought had already been decided. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe to A Journey of Hearts. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories that remind us all what truly matters. My name is Garrick Rowan, and at 39 years old I thought I understood how marriages quietly died. There were no dramatic betrayals, no shouting matches that shattered dishes, and no shocking secrets that made headlines. Instead, there was silence. Endless, exhausting silence. My wife, Mireya, and I had been married for 11 years. We met at a charity book fair on a sunny afternoon, fell in love over long walks and coffee shops, and built a modest life together in a peaceful neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names. In the beginning we laughed over the smallest things. We danced while cooking dinner, stayed awake talking until sunrise, and promised that no matter what life threw at us, we would always remain each other's safest place. Life, however, has a way of testing promises that seem effortless when they are first spoken. 3 years earlier my father had become seriously ill. Caring for him demanded nearly every spare hour I had. Hospital visits replaced weekend adventures, financial worries replaced dreams of traveling, and exhaustion became a permanent companion. Mireya stood beside me through every appointment, every emergency phone call, and every sleepless night. Yet instead of bringing us closer, the stress slowly built invisible walls between us. After my father passed away, I buried myself in work because it felt easier than facing grief. My office became the place where I could avoid my own emotions. I left before sunrise and often returned after dark. Even during breakfast I answered emails instead of looking into my wife's eyes. At first Mireya tried reaching me. She planned little surprises, suggested weekend drives, and left handwritten notes inside my lunch bag. I appreciated them in silence but rarely responded. Eventually the notes disappeared. The weekend plans stopped. The smiles became smaller. We still said good morning and good night, but the warmth that once filled our home seemed to fade with every passing season. Friends noticed before we did. Invitations became awkward because we always arrived looking tired. Family gatherings ended with relatives exchanging worried glances after watching us sit together without truly speaking. Every conversation between us revolved around grocery lists, utility bills, or whether the washing machine needed repair. We had become experts at managing a household while forgetting how to nurture a marriage. The idea of divorce did not appear overnight. It grew quietly inside me like a shadow. Every lonely dinner convinced me she had already emotionally left. Every unanswered question made me assume she no longer cared. When she smiled while texting someone, I wondered whether she found happiness everywhere except at home. Instead of asking her what she felt, I created stories in my own mind and slowly began believing them. One Thursday afternoon a coworker casually mentioned that sometimes people simply grow apart. Those words settled heavily inside me. For days I couldn't stop repeating them. Maybe growing apart wasn't anyone's fault. Maybe love simply expired. Maybe ending things before resentment consumed us both was an act of mercy rather than failure. The following week I contacted a lawyer. Holding those papers made me feel strangely calm. Painful, yes, but certain. I decided I would tell Mireya after the weekend, giving myself one final day to prepare. Before returning home, I remembered that her longtime friends were hosting a small daytime garden gathering to celebrate a birthday. She had asked weeks earlier whether I wanted to come, and I had politely declined. Now, thinking it might be the last social event connected to our marriage, I decided to stop by briefly and tell her I had forgotten an important document at home. The garden overflowed with sunlight. Colorful flowers lined the fences, laughter drifted through the warm air, and the scent of fresh lemonade mixed with blooming roses. I parked quietly and walked toward the backyard gate. Before stepping through, I heard familiar voices coming from the patio. I recognized Mireya's gentle laugh immediately. Instinctively I paused, not intending to eavesdrop but unwilling to interrupt. One of her friends asked how things were going between us. I expected to hear confirmation of everything I feared. I prepared myself to hear complaints, disappointment, or perhaps even relief that our marriage was nearing its end. Instead, I heard something that made my heart stop. Mireya admitted that she worried about me every single day. She said she knew I carried grief that I refused to share with anyone. She confessed that watching me become quieter after my father's death had broken her heart because the joyful man she married seemed to disappear behind invisible walls. She explained that she often stayed awake after I fell asleep, wondering how she could reach someone who no longer believed he deserved comfort. She blamed herself for not finding the right way to help me heal. Then she said something that I have never forgotten. She said that even though I barely smiled anymore, every morning she still packed my lunch with my favorite snacks because she hoped one small reminder of love might brighten an otherwise difficult day. She said she still believed that somewhere beneath the sadness was the same man who once danced with her in the kitchen. She wasn't holding on to the past because she was afraid of change. She was holding on to hope because she still loved me with every part of her heart. The world around me suddenly became silent. The divorce papers inside my envelope felt heavier than bricks. For months I had convinced myself that she had stopped loving me. In reality, she had been carrying enough love for both of us while I hid behind assumptions I never bothered to question. As I stood there in the warm daylight, memories flooded back with painful clarity. Every handwritten note I had ignored. Every invitation I had declined. Every moment she reached toward me while I quietly stepped away. I realized that loneliness had not been something she created. It was something we both suffered because neither of us knew how to break the silence. I looked down at the envelope in my hands and suddenly felt ashamed. Not because divorce itself is always wrong, but because I had been prepared to end our marriage without first giving honesty one final chance. I had mistaken silence for rejection when, in truth, silence had been grief wearing a different face. For the first time in years, tears filled my eyes beneath the bright afternoon sun. And for the first time in years, I made a decision not out of fear, exhaustion, or pride but out of love that I finally realized had never truly disappeared. To be continued in Part 2.